and we are glad to be here this evening. The train went by just at the right time there, so that kind of gave us a good start to the show for this evening. I am your host, Mike Legg. Thanks so very much for being alongside of us with the head coach of the Citadel Bulldogs, Brent Thompson, alongside. For the next hour, we will talk about Citadel football and preview the upcoming game for the Bulldogs as they will go to Chattanooga this weekend. And they will be taking on the Chattanooga Mocs, and we'll talk all about that as we go along on the program here today. So good to have you alongside, whether you're here with us or whether you are listening on the radio or watching on YouTube or whatever the case may be. We are happy that you're with us tonight. Head coach Brent Thompson is alongside, and we are about to get into all of the different things that have happened for the Citadel Bulldogs in the last several hours since the ball game on Saturday night against the Wofford Terriers. Folks, we will adjust the sound. We'll probably have to do so in the next segment, but we will adjust the sound momentarily here so that it will be appropriate for those who are listening on location here today. But those of you listening on the radio, we'll go ahead and get started. The head coach is alongside here, and we were talking a little bit before we went on the air a little while ago, Coach, about what it's like to try to put a game behind you. And in your particular case, Sundays are difficult when you have a loss to deal with. And I was joking with you a little while ago about, I kind of like that in my coach. I hate that somebody feels kind of bad on Sunday when you're getting up after a loss, but I like that it bothers the team. I like that it bothers my coach, and obviously bothered on Sunday when you woke up and had to start kind of trying to process what happened the day before.
Yeah, Mike, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to get up, and you put so much into the game plan. Our players put so much into the game plan. This game plan really just didn't happen. It just didn't come about the week of. We had been preparing this game plan. We had been studying this game plan, both offensively and defensively, going all the way back to the spring. Even our spring practices were geared and designed to putting together a good game plan for Wofford, and I thought we did. And that's what probably hurt the most is that when you wake up Sunday and you put everything that you possibly could into it, it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to. You still got to get up and go to work the next morning, but it's very, very difficult to get out of bed. And that that the way that you react and the attitude that you bring to practice that day and the way that you handle it with the football team is going to mean everything moving forward. So you've got to collect yourself. You've got to get over it very, very quickly. You've got to pick yourself back up, and you've got to go back to work. And it's difficult. It's difficult for Tiffany. It's difficult for my two little girls right there. But we've got to get up, and of course, we've got to attack this next game like it's like we need to win it, and we do.
Tell me, and we've talked about this sort of thing before, but tell me how, you play the game, either you play it in the afternoon or you play it in the evening or you play it at home or you play it on the road. Either way, what's Sunday like? What do you guys try to do as a team on Sunday? When do the coaches get together? When do the players come in? What do you do with the players? Talk about a typical Sunday, because a lot of people who are not intricately involved in it like you guys are turn it off completely. They might watch the NFL the next day or whatever the case may be. Well, talk about what Sunday is like around the football office.
Well, Sunday's a day for us to get ahead, get prepared. We've got to get a lot of the things from the previous game out of us. We like to get out. We like to run around. We like to stretch out a little bit. As far as the staff arrives at around 11:30 or so. We meet at 12 o'clock. We prepare ourselves. It usually takes us about 2.5 to 3 hours to watch the game film between offensive side of the ball and defensive side of the ball. It's about 2 hours. And then you're watching about another 45 minutes of special teams together. Then we bring our players in, and our players, they get an hour-long lift in. And then we meet with them for about 50 minutes or so about the previous game. We don't get through the whole game offensively and defensively. And then we spend about a half an hour on special teams right there. Understanding, trying to learn from our mistakes, moving forward. What can we get better? There's no better teaching tool than video. There's no better video than game video. There's no better opportunity to make a correction than it is in a game. So we've got to take advantage of all that time, and we've got to get it all out of the way, because we say by the time Sunday practice starts, we want to have it all and we want to move forward. Sunday practice for us has typically been a lot of special teams fundamentals. We do a good solid 30 to 35 minutes of special teams fundamentals. And then we do about another 30 or 40 minutes of just offense and defense. Some of that is offensive, defensive fundamentals. And then we start getting ahead on our game plans. Typically what we do on Sundays are game plans that we've already had the preliminary game plan from the summertime, so we don't have to break down a whole lot of film. After practice, we send the players to go get dinner, and they're done for the night. The staff now, on the other hand, we'll start to prepare and watch some more game film. Monday has been typically our day off because of late labs and classes and things, so that's why we typically get a lot of our work done on Sundays.
When you get the guys together, when the team gets back together for the first time, have you found that you have a resilient bunch of guys? Have they put things kind of in perspective? I mean, can you read things in their faces? What do you see when you look at your guys?
Up until this past week, I thought we were very resilient. We came back in ready to go, and this week was very, very difficult. And I sensed, just like I sensed and the rest of the staff sensed it, was that we put everything we had into this game. We wanted it. We felt that it was. They sent us home early in December. We didn't hype it up very much, but we all felt it. We all understood it, and it was one that was circled on our calendar, and it was one that emotionally I think everybody in the stand saw. We came out very, very fired up, very, very ready to play, and except for probably about 2 or 3 plays on the offensive side and 2 or 3 plays on the defensive side, we played a fairly good football game.
All right, we're going to get into that game, and I definitely want to talk about what the coaches saw from a video perspective when they did get back together on Sundays. Lots of things to talk about with regards to the Wofford game before moving on to the Chattanooga game, and we've got all of that coming up in just a little bit from right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see that Coach is a wing eater, and I want to remind you about the Citadel Cadet special that we have going on Wednesday nights at the downtown location of Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue. 50% off wings from 6 p.m. until close. It's a dine-in only deal, and it's for Citadel cadets only. They have a lot of leave on Wednesdays for the most part. Therefore, they have an opportunity to maybe get downtown from campus, and we want to incentivize them to do that. And so a 50% off wings special for Citadel cadets here at the downtown location, 126 Williman Street, a dine-in only deal, 6 p.m. until close when we have the head coach Brent Thompson radio show. And there are 4 more of those, including tonight. So we are closing in. We're at about the halfway point of the season. An 11-game schedule gets done at 5.5. And so at halftime of the game against Wofford was the halfway point of the season. So we'll be talking about some of that, maybe some mid-season progress reports with the coach and all of those things. We're going to take our first time out of the show, though, and when we come back, we'll jump right in. We'll talk about the game that was. The Wofford Terriers were in town to take on the Citadel Bulldogs. More of the Coach Brent Thompson Show next on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
TD Bank's new intern, Bart, is one of those robots from another bank. We're training him to bank human. Bart, why are you winding the clock back?
The clock stated 11:35 p.m., but they are still working.
The clock is fine. Our live customer service is available all night, and all day for that matter. He's learning.
At TD Bank, we do things differently.
Hello?
Like live customer service.
Hello?
24/7. Don't just bank. Bank human.
Since 2002, the lottery has helped award more than 1 million scholarships. So when you play, you're not just taking a chance. You're also giving one.
The great thing about an old truck is you can treat it like an old truck, which is exactly why you got a truck in the first place. It's not old, it's broken in. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how. That's not gonna buff out.
TD Bank's...
Welcome back to Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown. It is the head coach Brent Thompson radio show live from 126 Willamette Street. We're glad to have you with us, and we are rolling into the second segment of the show and talking a little bit about what went down with the Citadel Bulldogs over the weekend. They took on the Wofford Terriers, a team that they faced twice last year. Head coach Brent Thompson is alongside. We're glad to have you with us wherever you may be listening in from this evening, and we're going to get it right underway here. The Citadel Bulldogs are 3-3 on the season now and 1-3 in Southern Conference play. So we'll start things off, Coach, by, as we always do in the opening segments, we talk about what your game was that you just played. Talk to me about when the guys got together, and I'm talking about the coaches, when you got together noonish on Sunday and looked at the film. Sometimes what you see is not as bad as you thought. Sometimes it's better than what you thought. Upon further review of the tape of this game, what kind of things did you see?
Well, first of all, we talked about the game plan. We always talk about how the game plan worked, or where we could have done better as a staff. And there's a couple of. We thought the first half played exactly the way that we wanted it to play. We went out there and played. We always know it's going to be a tight ball game. We knew it was going to be a defensive battle. Both defenses are very good, and both have a good idea of what the other one's doing. So it's always that way. We know what kind of ball game it is. The other thing that we talked about was just the key plays in the game. You don't know where they exist. You don't know when they're going to happen. And unfortunately, that's where I think, we just didn't capitalize on key plays. And we've got to do a better job. We've got to do a better job with our players of understanding, hey, this could be a pivotal and key play. We've got to make sure that we're on our game right there. But other than that, it was very, very typical. It was a physical ball game. I thought emotionally we were ready to play. It was probably the most emotional game that we've played in a long time. We showed up and we were playing physical on both sides of the ball. And we've got to be able to sustain that. And I think that's where we fell short a little bit. And we got to sustain it in the second half. We sat back a little bit too much, both offensively and a little bit defensively, not as much. And didn't get after it as much as we probably should have. Maybe played a little bit too much field position game in the second half, and instead of going after it a little bit more and trying to change the field position more on our end.
Relatively well-played game. There was only one turnover on each side in the game. Penalties were not in a tremendous abundance for the ball game. There were 5 on each side. Could be worse, obviously, where that is concerned. So, you mentioned the emotion of the game, coming out in an emotional state. We've talked before about your football team sometimes not playing its best when it's as amped up. I thought there was tremendous energy, and I thought there was tremendous intensity, and I thought the guys played well.
Well, Mike, going back to maybe a week or 2 weeks prior to that, when we weren't as hyped up, I didn't think we played very well. We didn't play with enough edge, and that's what it came down to. Is I told the players on Friday night and then again on Saturday that we needed to attack this game and we needed to attack it with edge, and that's exactly what we got. And you're right. It's usually I try not to get them too hyped up, as they don't. Sometimes they get overamped for it, but this one I felt was the way that we needed to play, and we did.
Here's how the first quarter would go. The Citadel Bulldogs would lead by 7-0 after quarter number 1. That was a circumstance where after one quarter, wow, you look at the stats and you're like, this is pretty impressive. You ran for 99 yards in the first quarter. They ran for 13 yards and did not complete a pass in the first quarter of play. The Citadel Bulldogs' first drive was a 16-play drive, 81 yards. It took 7:32 off the clock. You score a touchdown on a 7-yard touchdown run by Dominique Allen, and I'm thinking, wow, you chewed up a lot of clock. You didn't give them an opportunity to possess the ball all that much. Pretty efficient first quarter for you guys.
Well, first of all, you'll notice on offense is we huddled, and we haven't huddled in 3 years consistently like we did in this game. So we knew we had to chew some clock. That was the first part of our game plan. The second part of our game plan was to try to keep them off balance a little bit, because as soon as they dial into what you're doing, they're a very, very good defense. They know exactly what the schemes are. They run some very similar schemes. So I thought we did that. We kind of kept them off balance a little bit. We had a very, very nice opening drive, and of course it goes down there and scores. We ate up a lot of clock. We got the ball back in great position right there, and we didn't do anything with the second drive. But once again, the third drive comes in. The next thing you know is now it's another 16-play drive, and we're eating up some clock. So that ends up being a great first half for us.
And the first quarter, 10 minutes of possession time for the Bulldogs, 10:04, and Wofford had the ball for 4:56. So after one quarter of play, it is a 7-0 ball game. The Bulldogs are in front. Coach mentioned another long sustained drive. Wofford would score at 8:24 of the second quarter, a 1-yard run by Brandon Goodson. They had a 10-play, 82-yard drive in 5:42 to tie the ball game up. The one coach refers to was with 11 seconds to go in the first half. Rod Johnson scores from 2 yards out, a 2-yard run capping a 16-play, 77-yard drive in 8:05. Almost scored in that particular instance on a long pass up the sideline to Josh LeBlanc.
Well, there's two things about that drive right there. One is Jordan Black came in and did a great job with that drive. That was the second part of our game plan, and that was let's give them two quarterbacks to look at. We're going to have almost two separate game plans. They ran the same plays, but my thought process was different with each player. And one was going to be, all right, we've got to find a way to get the ball to the perimeter. We've got to find a way to get the ball here and there. And I thought it worked brilliantly for the first two drives or the first one of each of those guys that were in. So it ended up being a pretty good drive for us. Yeah, we had a great pass play. Jordan throws a beautiful ball right to the corner and just stepped out right on the 1-yard line, converting a fairly long third down there, which was a good drive. I mean, the drive that Wofford had was, like you said, it was an 80-yard drive. It was a good drive, but they were helped out by a big pass play, and that's where the two defenses are a little bit different right there. Is we sold out, committed to stopping the run. We did a great job with it. But, we let them get out on one big pass play right there, and that hurt us. And then we know that they're not going to give us the big play. They sit back in the secondary. They're more aggressive with their up front guys. So you've got to be able to constantly drive the football against them. And so it was working out to our favor there.
14-7 Bulldogs with 11 seconds to go. That would be the lead that you would take to halftime. At that point, you're out rushing them 156-12. So after one half of football, you're running the ball. You're on pace for over 300 yards in the game for yourself. You're stopping the run. They only had 12 yards on the ground in 14 carries, and they had 81 total yards in the first half of play. So far, so good, right?
Yeah, everything we were doing offensively was getting the ball to the perimeter, keeping them off balance, running some counter plays. And eventually what happens is you got to get back to running some semblance of what you normally do. So that's what we tried to do. We attacked it in the second half of get them playing to the perimeter a little bit more. Let's establish the fullback. Let's get ourselves downhill. Let's get the eyes of the linebackers a little bit off a little bit. And unfortunately, we weren't able to establish the fullback. Now, on defense, we continued to do a good job of stopping the run. We were very, very up front. We pressured them. Unfortunately, the first drive of the second half, and we had the quarterback, and Goodson makes a great play, gets out of a tackle by Noah, and he's got a receiver open down the sideline, and I think that that was tough to take on the first drive of the second half.
The young man, Brandon Goodson, ended up being the offensive player of the week in the league. Wanted to ask you a little bit about the quarterback situation, and you alluded to it a little bit a while ago. You had referred to, obviously, that game was a game where you're going to play both guys, and you did, and you got both guys involved relatively early in the ball game. But something else that you said piqued my interest, and that was that you had plays and game plans for each quarterback specifically. When they were in the game plan changed depending upon the guy that was in there. Can you explain that and how, exactly, without giving away too much, exactly what you were trying to accomplish with that?
Well, Jordan's got he's got an ability to make guys miss. He's got an ability to get vertical. So with Jordan, it was more of a vertical attack game. It was a more direct. We're getting on the perimeter. We're getting on the perimeter with him pretty quickly. With Dominique, it was more of the counter game in there. It was more of the fullback game in there. It was a lot more reading going on in there. It was a lot more of, hey, let's get him moving in this direction. He's got an innate ability to be able to handle all the moving parts. Jordan is more, let's get on the perimeter. Let's get after it a little bit quicker.
We are going to get into the second half of this game specifically when we come back in a moment here. Another commercial break coming at you now. Second half of the Wofford game, and then we'll move on later in the program and talk about the upcoming opponent for the Citadel Bulldogs, which is Chattanooga, and the Mocs. We'll talk about them coming up in just a bit. This is the Coach Brent Thompson radio show, and it airs on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
Sorry, Dad.
Sure, you could get him a new car. You could also light a pile of money on fire.
Sorry.
Because as long as Mr. It wasn't my fault takes the wheel on occasion, maintaining this car is your best option. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how.
Dad, where are you going?
Buying a home is a big financial decision, so you need a strong team working on your mortgage. That team is at South Atlantic Bank. Decisions are made right here in our community by mortgage professionals who really know the Low Country. South Atlantic Bank offers competitive rates and terms on loans for home purchase or refinance. If you need a mortgage loan, you need the mortgage loan professionals at South Atlantic Bank. South Atlantic Bank Mortgage Group, providing the keys to home ownership.
Welcome back to Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown for another edition of the Coach Brent Thompson Radio Show. I'm your host, Mike Legg. Glad to have you with us as we're recapping the Wofford game, which the Terriers were able to win by a 20-16 count. I'll ask before we get too far into that game, specifically the third quarter, Coach, was, one thing that I saw, and I had some conversations with their broadcaster before the ball game, Wofford is doing a lot of the things that your club did last year. Do you see parallels between those two sides? Because they've won a lot of close games. You guys won a lot of close games. And last year, when you did win games close, I think it contributed to your confidence level. And as the games went along, you were comfortable in circumstances when you were in the clutch, so to speak.
I think the number one thing that I see out of them is when they needed a play, they got one. And that was exactly where we were last year, whether it was Collie Williams against them or whether it was Collie or the kicker against Mercer. Cody Clark did a great job coming in. We got a play out of him. It was Josh LeBlanc in the Furman game. He gets us all the way down there. So we had plenty of those plays the year before. That's where I think we're struggling a little bit. And you're right. Sometimes it's just a confidence thing is, hey, we can do this. We can come back and somewhere along the line, we got to get our confidence back. We've got to start making some of those plays that we had made last year that we're just missing out on. And once we do, it'll get turned the other way, and we'll be right back in it.
You had mentioned earlier when I asked about resilience of players and how guys react and what you see in their faces. When you know, and you did know when you saw it in the guys when you met with them on Sunday, how do you build guys back up? What's your particular strategy for getting guys past things, moving on? What kind of things do you think about to say to those guys?
Well, first of all, we look to the future. There's still plenty of hope out there. We could still win, the next few games. We can get to 7 wins very easily there. Now, we've got to, of course, win all those games, and we've got to come to play every single one of those games. But really, to be honest with you, there's still plenty to play for here. We've got an opportunity to have a winning season. We've got an opportunity to still beat some really good teams down the line and have an opportunity to compete. So not all is lost is just because you lost 3 conference games. We just need to keep on moving on and getting better.
Another thing that I was going to ask you about, and it wasn't a big issue in this particular game. As I mentioned before, there were a couple of fumbles on each side, but only one lost on each side. Practicing ball security. From the previous week, obviously it was a little bit more of an issue than it was this week. So I was curious, just a curious question about the things that you do to try to practice that so that that becomes a little bit less of an issue, or at least you've shown a light on it somehow, I guess.
Well, Mike, we spend 5 minutes on it every single day. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. We've got all sorts of contraptions that do it. We've got blasters in the middle of the field, things with all these things hanging off of it that you got to run through. We've got these big arm pads that you try to punch the ball out with it. We've got these big giant rubber bands that we try to jerk the ball out of it. We've got these balls that beep that we've got to squeeze the life out of the ball so that you can hold on to the ball as tightly as possible. Every single one of those things we work with at least probably about 15, 20 minutes a week on, and you have to. Really, when it comes down to it, it always comes down to one thing, and that's just poor positioning of the ball. We always yell at the guys, they got to be high and tight. And if you haven't been carrying the ball high and tight and you hadn't been doing it all high school, you've got to change a bad habit. And you've got to do it in a matter of a short amount of time when you've got them at the college level. Because at any moment, you go down to our defensive field every single day, what are they doing? They're teaching strip techniques. They're teaching how to recover fumbles, and they're teaching scooping and scoring. And that's what they do. So we've got to be able to counteract that and hold on to the football.
At the half, Bulldogs led the game 14-7 in the third quarter, and not far into it, actually, Wofford's able to tie the ball game up on a 59-yard touchdown pass from Goodson to Jason Hill. 59-yard drive, 3 plays only a minute and a half later, and all of a sudden this is a ball club in Wofford that is right back in the game with you guys, all tied up.
Yeah, it was all tied up. The third quarter was a little bit difficult for us. We get the ball back, and, of course, we've got to punt it back to them. We didn't do a great job of being able to get first downs on the offensive side, but the defense was playing well. All we were really asking to do was just flip the field position, play the field position battle. I didn't think that they could score on a long field if they had to drive the ball, which they only really drove the ball at least once on us, and that was at the end of the game. So up until that point, the game plan was still working out fairly well for us, and they gave us a gift. We pinned them deep. They turned the ball over. We have an opportunity to go in and score, and unfortunately we turned it back over to them at the 1-yard line, and instead of trading 6 points in there, we traded it for 2 because the defense got us 2 back.
It did lead to a safety, and one of those things that is always pretty exciting. I mean, your defense comes onto the field, and they realize, wow, this team's got to drive 99 yards on us to do anything here, so kind of able to pin your ears back just a little bit. They didn't get much going. They didn't go under center. They still did some shotgun stuff, if I remember the circumstances right. And your defense was ready to go there and ends up with the 2.
Yeah, we came out with great defense, and they did. They smelled blood in the water, and they got after him pretty good. They blitzed him up pretty good. I think they ran a power play or a belly play right at the start, and then the second play, they tried to run a zone option play, got pushed into the backfield. Really, the unsung hero on the defensive side that may not have made a lot of plays, but you could see he caused a lot of plays, and that was Ken Allen. He was disrupting the nose guard. He played directly over the center most of the day, and he was causing some disruption in the backfield.
After the safety, it was 16-14 Bulldogs. So then we go to the fourth quarter, and the only play that was a score at that point came with 1:10 to go. Wanted to see if we could walk through the latter portions of the ball game. It's always something that all happens very fast. You have timeouts. Do I burn them? Do I not burn them? What you're expecting an offense to do, what you're expecting them not to do in circumstances like that. So the last, 3 minutes of the ball game, walk me through the things I'm always fascinated by all the different things that a coach has to factor in with his staff when the game is on the line and the team is driving on your defense.
So we punted the ball back to them. They have to travel 70. They got right around the 32-yard line, I believe. So they had to travel about 70 yards to score. And they had to probably travel about 30 to 35 yards just to get into field goal range or have an attempt at a field goal. So we felt good about where we were at in the field position game. I felt great about where our defense was playing. I felt like if they had to drive the ball, it was going to be very difficult. So if they had to run the ball, it was going to be very difficult. Unfortunately, there was about 2 or 3 plays in that drive that kind of got them down there, and it got them down there fairly quickly. As we were doing a great job of stopping the run, and then I think we gave up an 8-yard pass and then an 11-yard pass that got them a quick 19 yards down the field and kind of got them closer to the territory. From there, kind of we started to fizzle out a little bit. It was a fairly long drive. There were still about 5 or 6 minutes when they took over. And once they got down into field goal range, now you've got to start thinking about, okay, they have an opportunity to kick the field goal. Is it a sure hit for the field goal for them? You don't really want to conventional wisdom is you don't call your timeouts until you get about inside of 2 minutes there. So you're just holding on to your timeouts. There got to be about 1 point in the drive. It was 3rd and 7. And they needed, obviously, the 7 yards to keep going right there. And you think about using the timeout there because they had been driving the ball. However, you're right about, I think it was right about the 150, 148 mark. So you're right around that 2-minute mark. You don't necessarily want to call the timeout there because if you get the stop, then you call the timeout, you save yourself a timeout. And you know there's one of two things. They can either run it or throw it, obviously. So if they throw it, there's a good chance it goes on the ground. We get the time back. If they run it, it was very difficult for them to run for 7 yards all day long. So that was why I held on to the timeout. Unfortunately, in hindsight, you may use it right there to kind of give your defense a little bit of a break because they did run it, they did get the first down, but at that point you had to call your timeouts and let it go. So that was the whole thought process into it. You had to stay at least one step ahead. You had to look at how you were going to handle it on offense. You got to be able to save yourself at least 2 timeouts on offense to be able to get back into field goal range at the time if they were going to kick the field goal. So there's many of those things that play out throughout the course of the game that you got to be try to stay one step ahead of.
1:10 left in the game. Andre Stoddard scores from 3 yards out. They went for 2 and did not get it. That was another long drive for them. 13 plays, 68 yards, and 5:13. Wofford was able to take the lead at 20-16, their first lead of the entire game. And then at that point, very difficult. You've got very little time left after you receive the kickoff, and you're out of timeouts in that circumstance, and a lot of pressure accompanies that.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure there, and you've got no timeouts, so you got to work the boundary. They know that they know that you're working the boundary, so here they are guarding the boundaries, and they're playing a 2 deep, and so they're playing a little bit of pressure on the outside. We couldn't get the ball out of bounds. We couldn't get enough first downs there. We couldn't complete balls right there. That becomes very difficult for our offense, but we work it every single day, every single Thursday, every week.
Wofford wins the game 20-16. Ready to put that one behind you?
Oh, yeah, I put it behind me on Sunday.
Guys like me always seem to continue to drag it out for you, so appreciate that, and that's the way the whole thing finished up. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with Coach about the upcoming opponent. We're going to talk about the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and the Mocs, who the Bulldogs will play and have played some very important games against since Coach and the rest of the guys have been on the staff at the Citadel. So stay tuned. We'll do all that when we come back from the timeout. This is the Coach Brent Thompson Radio Show on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
TD Bank's new intern, Bart, is one of those robots from another bank. We're training him to bank human.
Bart, why are you winding the clock back?
The clock stated 11:35 p.m., but they are still working.
The clock is fine. Our live customer service is available all night, and all day for that matter.
He's learning.
At TD Bank, we do things differently.
Hello?
Like live customer service.
Hello?
24/7. Don't just bank human.
Since 2002, the lottery has helped award more than 1 million scholarships. So when you play, you're not just taking a chance. You're also giving one.
The great thing about an old truck is you can treat it like an old truck, which is exactly why you got a truck in the first place. It's not old, it's broken in. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how. That's not gonna buff out.
TD Bank's
Welcome back to Fiery Brown's Home Team Barbecue downtown, 126 Williman Street. This is the Coach Brent Thompson radio show, and we are here every Wednesday night between 7 and 8, and back again next week for another edition of the show after the Bulldogs have taken on the Chattanooga Mocs, which they will play on Saturday at 2 p.m. I want to remind you about the cadet special that we have going on between 6 p.m. and close every Wednesday night. Citadel cadets get 50% off wings, a dine-in only deal from 6 until close every Wednesday night when the Coach Brent Thompson radio show is here, and it will be for the next 3 Wednesdays, not counting tonight. All right, so let's move forward here. Let's talk about the Chattanooga Mocs, and there is something that I get asked a lot, therefore I always include it in my notes, and I don't know how much about this you know, Coach, but I get asked more than not about what in the world is a mock, what is a Chattanooga mock. So I plan to go into that, but how much of that sort of stuff do you have any idea about? But strange sounding nicknames, for example.
Well, it was interesting because if you look at some of their logos, they've got the choo-choo train, so you're trying to put it all together. And then some of the logos, I believe at one time I thought it was a snake, and then another time it becomes this bird all of a sudden. And you just clued me into the fact that the state bird is a mockingbird, so now it all kind of made sense to me. But yeah, I was a little bit confused as to what it actually meant. At one time, we did look it up in the staff room to find out exactly where it evolved from. So I had heard the story, but didn't realize that the mockingbird was the state bird of Tennessee.
Until 1997, it was short for moccasins, but the school opted to move away from that and adopted Tennessee's state bird, the mockingbird. And so now Mocs is short for mockingbirds, and therefore that's the way it goes. I will say, they do act as if they never were the moccasins. It's just like, come on now, we've all been around a long time. But that is one question that I do get quite a bit. What is a mock? And Mocs is now short for mockingbirds when it comes to the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. Now, with regards to their team, this is one of those back and forths that really resembles the rivalry, because in your tenure as either an assistant coach or the head coach here, the games against UTC or Chattanooga have had tremendous meeting. Conference championships were on the line. So I certainly have seen them as one of the more budding rivalries, I suppose, between the two sides, because I think that's what a rivalry is when teams lose or win in circumstances where the stakes are really high.
Well, Mike, when we first got here, they were on top of the league, and they were doing a great job. And Coach Huseman was there, and his son was playing quarterback for them. They were the class of the league. So when we got here, we played them on noon on a Saturday afternoon one day, and it was demoralizing. We couldn't stop them. We couldn't move the football. It was one of the worst, toughest afternoons that I had as a football coach. So we had looked to that team right there and said, if we want to be the best, we've got to beat the best, and we've got to match those guys. So the next year when it did come down at their place and it came down to the conference championship, we put a lot into that game. It kind of felt like the Wofford game after that game. We played them fairly tight. We had our opportunities there. We turned the ball over. We gave up the first play from scrimmage on defense for a touchdown. But we were driving it. We fumbled the ball somewhere inside of the 10 or 15-yard line. But we played them very close that day, and we knew that we weren't far off. And that was for the outright league championship, and we ended up tying it with them. So last year, it was the circle on your calendar game. This is the game that we're going to get after. And put together a great game plan, executed a great game plan, both offensively and defensively. We ate a lot of clock. We just kind of pounded the ball, grinded it out on the field, on the turf a little bit. Dominique Allen was, I think he was the lead rusher in the game. And you're going up against a very, very good defense there, and an extremely good offense. And our defense just kind of kept them in front of them, didn't give up any big plays, and it ended up working out well for us. So we kind of felt like we were back on top when we beat those guys. And these things run their cycles, and that's what's happening to them right now. And we're running our cycle right now, but we both hope that it'll be a quick cycle and a quick turnaround.
What Coach was talking about was the game back in October of 2014. Chattanooga jumped out to a 31-0 lead at halftime, ended up winning the ball 34-14. This is the perfect example of how a team beats up on you and you strive to turn it around, because the next year, as you talked about, it was closer. And then the next year after that, you get over the top against a team that you really want to get over the top against. In the game in 2015, they jumped out to a 21-0 lead. Had you had a few more minutes in that ball game, I think, because of the way you played in the second half, you probably come back and get that one. And then last year, I was extremely encouraged by the way you played in that game and then won that game. And I wonder if you feel like, in using the two words, defining moment. Was that one last year? Obviously, the Wofford game was a big game for you last year, but finally getting over the hump against the team that you couldn't beat in previous years, was that kind of the defining moment for you guys last year?
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. It was the point at which you knew that you had a good football team and that you could do a lot of things. And we had a lot of confidence going into that game. And then, of course, coming out of that game, we felt that we could play with anybody in the league. And we felt that we could probably play with anybody in the country at that point. And we deserved our top 10 ranking. And from that, it was probably one of the best feelings that I've had as a coach.
It was a heck of a victory for the Bulldogs last year's game. 7-7 after one. The Bulldogs led at halftime 17-14 and 19-14 after three. And then you pull away and you win the game 22-14, ran for 342 yards, had the ball for almost 40 minutes. And as you mentioned, Dominique Allen with a big game had 135 yards rushing and 11 tackles from Collie Williams in the ball game there. That felt like the game where, okay, fourth quarter time comes, we're fresh and could probably play 5 quarters. They're not, and will be lucky to get through 4.
Yeah, it was very typical of that year is that when we needed the drives, we got the drives, we were able to pound the ball out. And that was all we were looking to do, was just kind of maintain possession of the ball, change the field position. And if we get into field goal range, which is what we ended up doing there at the end of the game, just get into field goal range, get yourself up by more than a field goal, and rely on your defense to just kind of keep them in front of you.
How close are you at times this year, or how far away do you feel like you are at times this year to being in the place where you finish the way you want to finish in terms of drives?
No, I think we're still far away from that at this point, and last weekend was very indicative of that. Is we needed to run the fullback, we needed to eat some clock, we needed to keep our defense off the field, we needed to churn out some yards, and there was times where we could. There was times where I thought our fullback play was pretty decent. We needed to be able to keep on getting yards in there, but one missed technique, one missed fundamental, one small missed assignment, one missed read in there, and it set you back. And that's where I don't know that we're right just there yet. We're getting closer. We're getting to that point, but every single game is learning for us right now. We're finding out a way to be able to, hey, this is how you win the game. This is how you put this game away. I think we're in good shape. I don't know that it's a conditioning thing. Sometimes I think it becomes more of an assignment and a technique when you're tired. That kind of a thing is we let fundamentals go away from us a little bit that we've got to get back.
Before we get back to Chattanooga, and we will talk about them and what they are all about when you go play them on Saturday afternoon on the road, there were some questions that I have gotten, whether it be by Twitter or text or whatever the case may be, in recent weeks, and I think it might even go back as far as the Samford game. We've seen I formation out of your team. Can you talk about why that is a part of things traditionally, 2 A-backs and a B-back, but you've done shifting with an A-back into a wide receiver spot, leaving an I formation. Can you talk about being in the I this year in offense?
It's been a good adjustment, and I talked a little bit about it in the spring and early part of the summer, that a little bit of 20% of our offense is going to kind of evolve from there. We did a little bit of it last year. We dabbled with it last year. We dabbled with it in the spring. And a lot of it had to do with just being able to find different ways to get guys the ball. Cam Jackson, are we a little bit better of operating out of that? Are we motioning guys around, trying to keep support guys off of you? And I think it's worked out fairly well for us. So I thought it worked out fairly well for us in this most recent game plan. It'll be in all of our game plans moving forward. But we were able to motion guys around and take a little bit of the support off of their secondary. And a couple of times we had some guys wide open last week, and a lot of it was due to the motions and a lot of it was due to our backfield. What we find is people get keyed in on certain aspects of your play. They get keyed in on your A-backs. They get keyed in on your tackles. They get keyed in on your B-backs. So if you can do more things to get their keys off of you and get them on the motions and those kind of things, sometimes it's window dressing. But really, I like the way that it worked out, and I especially like the way it worked out last weekend. Unfortunately, we just weren't able to capitalize on some of them.
We are going to take our last commercial break, and when we come back, we'll dig deeper into Chattanooga and talk about the mocks and what they're all about, the Bulldogs' travel plans and all those sorts of things, and also look at some of the scores or at least some of the games that will take place this weekend in the Southern Conference. And the coach and the players made a new friend over the weekend that I'm going to talk about too. 14-year-old little girl who came to the game, and we want to talk about that with Coach as we go along in the final segment of the show, which is coming up after this timeout on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
When you're feeling hungry, you don't want to mess around with a quarter-pound meat sandwich. Instead, eat the new half-pound roast beef sandwiches. 8 ounces of thinly sliced, tender roast beef. And if you really want a quarter pound of beef, that's cool. Just eat half of one of these. Arby's, we have the meats.
Style. Selection. Service. Quality. Value. See what everyone is talking about. Ashley Furniture Home Store.
How do we make sure there's toppings in each bite of Papa John's pizza? We check 80,000 times a year. Now get an extra large 2-topping pizza for just $11. Everyone's doing their part to make your game day better.
Dad, grab something good. No junk food, please.
Go for the Trumu! It's delicious!
That's chocolate. But it's nutritious and contains no artificial growth hormones.
Trumu, a truly good thing anytime.
Good thing it wasn't as cold as it was yesterday out here.
Mike Legg and head coach Brent Thompson back again at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown, 126 Williman Street, as we have our last segment coming down here for this evening show. Back again next week from 7 until 8 after the game against the Chattanooga Mocs. Chattanooga is 1-6. They're 1-3 in the Southern Conference right now. They're in a sixth-place tie and were picked to finish 4th. They have lost 3 consecutive ball games. They started the season on August the 26th at the FCS kickoff in Montgomery, Alabama, and lost to then 5th-ranked Jacksonville State 27-13, dropped a 45-10 decision at LSU, suffered a 21-7 setback in Chattanooga to Tennessee Martin, won at VMI 63-7, lost to Western Carolina in Chattanooga 45-7. Furman came in and beat them 2 weeks ago 41-17 on a day when the Mocs had just 7 rushing yards, and last week they were taken down at Mercer 30-10. 0-3 at home, they're 1-3 away. And having watched Chattanooga, I know, Coach, that you see that this is a team, particularly on the defensive side of the football, that's still a very talented bunch. They probably put more guys in the NFL than anybody else, maybe other than Samford, year in and year out. So I'll ask you this, and I know it's a hard question to answer. What's wrong with the Mocs?
Well, first of all, it's a brutal schedule. You don't want to have that schedule as your first year as the head coach. And let me tell you that right now. You don't want to play Jacksonville. You don't want to play Ted Martin. And then you go up against and you face a huge and a very good Western team. And then a resurgent Furman team. I mean, all these teams. Mercer's a good team, as I know. So you're seeing all these teams that are very, very good football teams. And that can be very difficult when you're trying to just get your system established. The second thing that they're fighting right now is they've got an injury bug. They've got about, the quarterback was out. Benefield came back. Now he's back. He was out again. So this week, there's a good chance he'll be back. But so they're playing a transfer quarterback. They played a freshman quarterback. And then Benefield is the senior that was supposed to be the starter all year long. So he may be back. They're still missing a couple of key guys like us. They lost 3 guys on the offensive line, and let me tell you, that's not an easy thing to do. Is you got to retrain a whole new offensive line. 3 out of 5 guys, that can be very difficult. Running back is gone. I thought the running back was a very, very good player from last year, and now the other running back that they had, I believe, was 25. He's still there. He's still a very good player. They still got some good wide receivers, so they're still feeling their way out. You know, when you have a coaching change, you're still kind of putting your system in place, and then you got to run into some very, very good FCS programs, including LSU, FBS team, which can be a very, very difficult task. Defensively, they've had a couple of guys injured as well, missing a couple of linebackers. They still got some pretty good transfers out there. Some of those guys will be back this week, I fully expect. So, and then same thing defensively. They're just trying to install their defense and get it the way they run it, and it takes time. It takes a process.
Chattanooga had a coaching change in the offseason. Russ Huseman, who'd been there for a while, goes to Richmond, and they hire a coach from a Division III program called John Carroll. Now, his name is Tom Arth, and he did very well at John Carroll, won 40 out of 48 games, and was the D3 National Coach of the Year last year. So I'll take you back to when that was all going down. There were a lot of rumors about who was going to get the job and who wasn't going to get the job. Were you surprised when you heard, and did you know anything about Tom Arth when he got the job?
Very surprised. I didn't know anything about him. It was one of those, when you see it come across the wire, you look at it and you have to go look it up to find out exactly what the scenario is. Then you got to start looking up his staff to find out where is he putting his staff together from. Try to find as many option teams, try to find as much film as you possibly can, even though you know that you have them later on in the year. It's still, there's no time prep, so you've got to make sure that you get all your prep time early on in the season.
Apparently, Arth was on a roster in the National Football League at one time, and the roster would have been the Indianapolis Colts. So I believe he knows a guy who, if he called, might get your attention, Peyton Manning. If Peyton Manning called you and said, hey, I got a hotshot assistant coach, and you have an opening, you'd probably pay attention to that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely, especially if I was in the state of Tennessee. You know, there's probably no bigger person in the state of Tennessee. You got Coach Fulmer there, of course. Johnny Majors was there at one time. I mean, all those good Tennessee coaches there. But you certainly would take a phone call from some of those guys that are very influential in that state.
Here is what's going on with Chattanooga right now. They run a multiple offense. They rank 8th in the league in total offense, 9th, 5th in passing. Coach referred to this. They've had 3 different quarterbacks who have started games. They have a Mississippi State transfer named Nick Tiano, opened games 1, 2, 3, and 4 because of a suspension to Alejandro Benefield. He started game 5 against Western Carolina, but was hurt in the first quarter. So Tiano comes back, and he goes down in the fourth quarter of the same game. So now Cole Copeland has started the last 2 ball games. You're not expecting necessarily Tiano, but Benefield, you mentioned, might come back. So you're in a circumstance where you pretty much have to prepare for just about everybody.
Yeah, very difficult. You know, very difficult. Talking to Coach Harrell is Benefield is very, very good on his feet. Copeland is very, very good with his arm. He's a young player. They want to throw the football. They do a lot of motions. They do a lot of shifts. They want to be able to, create mismatches all over the place. So it's been very challenging for our defensive staff. It's been very challenging for our scout team to just be able to get lined up, get guys motioned around. And those things can wear on your scout team. Those things can wear on your defense.
Their leading rusher, his name is Darrell Bridges. He's only run for 195 yards. Top target is Bingo Morton, who has 23 catches and 3 TDs. And Alfonso Stewart is the receiving yards leader with 292. 12 different players have caught a pass. They are 55% pass and 45% run, but their yards are 78% via the air. So, you mentioned some of the nuances to the changes to the offense there, but you had a guy in Huseman who had a son who was like Tim Tebow. I mean, he could throw the football, he could run the football, read defenses and things like that. How would you describe what they're trying to do? All they list themselves as a multiple offense. So how would you describe the differences between the 2 coaching staffs to prepare for?
Well, with when Huseman was there, they had the threat of him. When they needed a big play, they went to him. When they needed a big play, they would spread you out, and he would run the quarterback counter. He'd run the quarterback power. He'd run the power read, sweep, those kind of things that he can do. They're kind of out of that game a little bit. They were more run-oriented. Of course, they had the nice running back there a couple of years ago that kind of offset Huseman. This time around, they're more concentrated on pro-style offense, more get you mismatch, motion you around, confuse you with where's the tight end, confuse you with where are these guys going. That's where it can be very difficult.
Chattanooga is multiple on the defensive side of things, too. They rank 4th in the league in total defense, 5th in rushing defense, 3rd in passing defense. So that, I'm sure, has kept them in the games from time to time. This is a team with a -10 turnover margin. They have turned it over 16 times and have taken it away only 6 times. That'll hurt you. Obviously, it goes without saying that if you're +10 would make you national champion, but -10 is going to lose you a lot of football games.
Yeah, you always want to end up on the plus side of that category, and that's where we've kind of always hovered, and we've been right around, I think we're right around +1 right now. At one time, we were right around +5, which we were doing fairly well. But, yeah, that's a great indicator of you're giving possessions away right now, and you're not being able to capitalize on all those possessions. And for us, it comes down to more time management. It comes down to more killing the clock a little bit, keeping our defense fresh, keeping them off the field, and you're just giving possessions away.
This is the longest remaining trip that you have. This one will take, bus-wise, 7.5 hours. Is this a 2-day trip for you guys? Will you leave tomorrow?
Yeah, this is the second of our 2, and unfortunately we've got 2-2-dayers on the same year. We've got Sanford this year as well as UTC this year, so we'll go ahead and we'll stay. We'll leave tomorrow night. We'll leave at about 7:30, 8 o'clock. We'll get into our hotel just in Augusta at about 10:30. Go to bed. We'll wake up the next morning, and then we'll travel on from there and try to get a walkthrough in on the way over. But it can be very long. But we try to get over to Chattanooga somewhere between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. Give them a little bit of downtime before we start all of our meetings.
We have a very technical world now where you can practice on really nice fields and stuff like that. Yet when I leave hotels, I still sometimes see you guys do walk-arounds in the parking lot.
Yeah, whatever open space we can find is about what we do. We try to find turf fields and those kind of things. But when all else fails, is just find yourself an open space and we'll old school backyard it and we'll line up and play them.
That's exactly what I've seen so far. Now, we're closing in on the latter moments of the show. I mentioned that I was going to talk about a friend that you and the team made over the weekend, and I found out about this before the show. There was a 14-year-old girl by the name of Skylar who, when asked what she wished for through Make-A-Wish, she wanted to see a Citadel football game. Now, that'll turn a bunch of great big guys, tough guys, into mush pretty fast. So tell me about your new friend.
Well, to be honest with you, I found out about 2 weeks prior to that from one of our alums. So I've had 2 alums contact me about this, and you don't realize the situation. You don't realize the power that you absolutely have until something like this happens, and you realize that, man, we can make somebody's day. I mean, you never thought that anybody in the world that would be their number one goal, their number one wish would be to come to a Citadel football game, just because you just don't think of it in those kind of terms. But when you do, it's one of the greatest, most spectacular feelings. So Joe Thompson and Gil Pohl both reached out to the administration, Jim Center and myself, and asked if we would donate a ball. So we donated a ball to her. We signed a ball for her, and then we made it a special day, and I thought the administration did a great job. And then Gil, of course, sent me some pictures of it afterward, and it almost brought a tear to my eye just scrolling through the pictures, and it was so nice to see that we were able to make somebody's day like that. Unfortunately, we didn't get the win, but she was happy just as much, and she was in there with the cheerleaders and doing cheers, and it seemed like a great atmosphere. So she made our day as much as we probably made hers.
Well, very cool, very cool. Glad you did that, Coach. And we're out of time for the show tonight, but thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you in Chattanooga, okay?
Thanks, Mike.
All right, you bet. Coach Brent Thompson from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown. We're back again next week, but we'll be on the air Saturday at 1 o'clock on the city, 92.1 FM, 102.1 FM, and 1450 AM for the game broadcast. Bulldogs at Mox, and we'll see you then. Thank you very much for being with us.